Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Yud Dalid. Before beginning the Daf, please listen to the shir on the introductions to the halachos of Tumah and the many levels that are involved. It is an essential bit of knowledge to approach Daf Yud Dalid and the sixth Daf that follow. Daf Yud Dalid begins with a Mishnah, and the Mishnah launches us into a discussion of Tumah and its halachos, which will take us for the next seven Daf all the way to the end of the first parak of the Masechta. The reason this is brought here is because the end of the Mishnah, which we're about to learn, does refer back to Hilchos Pesach, but the Gemara then goes off and discusses Hilchos Tumah at length. Now, the Mishnah begins with three halachos. All three halachos are discussing situations in which you have something which has kedusha, so you're not allowed to make it tamei, but you are allowed to increase its level of tumah if it's tamei already. And these are three cases which we shall see. The Gemara will analyze them one at a time. The Gemara will look for a chiddush in each of them and explain exactly how the case makes sense. So the first halacha said by Rabbi Chanina Sakana Kahanim, and he says if you have meat of kachim, that's kodesh, that has become tamei as a vlad hatoma, that is a rishon or later toma, not an avatoma, so you're allowed to burn that meat. It has to be burned because it's tummy. You can't use it, you can't eat it. You were allowed to burn it together with other meat which became tummy with an av hatoma. Even though by having it together with the av hatoma, you will be, with the meat that became tummy through the av hatoma, you will be increasing the tuma on this meat. But you're allowed to do it anyway. Since it's being destroyed, it's getting burnt, it doesn't bother us that its tumah is going up. That's not an issue. Says Rabbi Akiva, similar halacha is that you're allowed to take oil which became tummy from a tvul yom. Tvul yom is somebody who became tummy for the day and needed to go to the mikvah, and he's already gone to the mikvah, but his tumah doesn't leave until the sun actually sets. During that stage, he's called a tful yom. He has a level of tumah, but it's lighter. So if he touches oil, that oil has to be burned. It is tameh, but it's a low level of tumah. You're allowed to burn it in a candle cup, meaning a cup which holds oil, even if that cup itself is a higher level of tumah, which the Mishnah describes as it became tameh by touching the dead. It became tamei from tumas mace. The third halacha is Rabbi Meir, who says, based on these two things, I can tell you something about chametz Pesach. Let's say you have truma tehira and you have truma timeya, both of which are chametz, and you're burning them on Erev Pesach when the time of Isser Chametz begins. Says Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to burn them together, and it's not a problem that one will be metame the other. The tamei chametz truma will be metame the tahor chametz truma. That's not a problem because it's being destroyed anyway. Just like Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina said, you're allowed to burn the tamei objects together with the tar objects because they're being destroyed. Here, it's also being destroyed, and therefore there's no problem. Now the Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and Rabbi Yossi says you cannot learn that halacha. The Gemara will explain why. And Rabbi Yossi also brings in two other opinions, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. So Gemara says that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua say that if it's tamei and tahar chametz truma that you're burning, you have to burn them separately. You can't burn them together. They do agree you can burn them, but you have to burn them separately. They themselves have a machlokes. What happens if you have truma timeya and truma that is safek tamei? Can you burn those together? That they do argue about. Rabbi Yeshua says you can burn them together, and Rabbi Eliezer says you cannot burn them together. So this is our Mishnah. It gives us three cases of a situation in which you have something which is kodesh. You're not allowed to make it tamei. It is tamei already. You're destroying it, and therefore it's not a problem if you increase its tumah. Now the Gemara is going to analyze these three cases one at a time and determine how they make sense and what the chiddush is. So first, the Gemara analyzes the statement of Rabbi Chanina Sakana Kahanim. He said you have two pieces of meat that are kachim, they're from karbonos, and you're burning them together, even though you're increasing the tumah of one of them. But how does he describe the case? One of them became tamei from a vlad hatoma, and one of them became tamei from an av hatoma. Says the Gemara, hold on, let's analyze this carefully. The one that became tamei from a vlad hatoma, the thing that was metamed was, let's say, a rishon. It itself is a sheni. Now it's coming in contact with another piece of meat that became tamei from an av hatoma. That means that piece of meat was a rishon. And guess what? When it touches this piece of meat, all it's going to make it into is a sheni. It's already a sheni anyway. The fact that you're burning it with a higher level of tumah doesn't make it a higher level of tumah. It makes it get the same level of tumah that it was before. What's the problem here? So the Gemara offers a couple of approaches to answer. The Gemara says we must be talking about where the meat that we're concerned about is not a sheni, it's a shlishi. It became tameh from a sheni, it's a shlishi. You put it together with something which is a rishon, it will now increase its level of tameh from a shlishi to a sheni, and that you're not allowed to do. The Gemara asks, well, how can you tell me that the meat which is a shlishi is going to become a sheni by touching the tameh meat? That means that the meat is being metame other meat. That's food being metame food. Don't we have a halacha that food can't be metame food? We have a pasuk that describes the tumah of food, and it says when you put water yutan mayim al zer v'nafal midavlasam alav tamehu. If you have food being metame food, if you have food becoming tameh, tamehu, the food is tameh, it itself is tameh. That seems to imply that it is tameh, but it can't be metame anything else. So food can't be metame food. So how does the meat, which is a rishon, make the meat, which is a shlishi, into a higher level of tameh? It can't be metame other food. So the truth is a three-way machlokes as to what this applies. According to the opinion of Abaye, this only is true by chulin, but truma and kachim it could. Well, this is talking about kachim, so then this wouldn't be a problem. As a matter of fact, the second opinion wouldn't be a problem either. The second opinion is of Adabar Ava. He says that this is only true by chulin and truma, but by kachim, food could be metame food. So that's okay here also. But according to Ravina, in the name of Rava, that says, no, this pasuk tells you that food can't be metame food. It doesn't matter what it is, truma, kachim, any of these things. So how does this carbon meat become tameh from the meat that it's touching? Food can't be metame food. So the Gemara offers an answer. The Gemara says we're talking about where the food, where the tameh meat, which was a rishon, was wet. And the water that's on it also became tameh. The water could be metame food, or the liquid could be metame other food. When we say food can be metame food, we're only talking about solid food. Liquids could be metame other foods, and therefore this liquid has the status of a rishon also. It became tameh the same time the meat that it's on became tameh. It's a rishon also. It'll go be metame the other piece of meat, which will become a sheni. Gemara says that can't be, because the case here doesn't say that it was meat with liquids. And it would have to say that if that was the halacha, because you're teaching me the wrong thing otherwise. You said you can't burn two pieces of meat together with each other if one is a higher level tumah than the other. That's not true. That's only if it's wet that it's a problem. The Gemara therefore resolves this and says, no, the issue here is not midarais, the issue is midarabanan. Midarabanan, a piece of food is able to be metame another piece of food, and that's what the potential problem would be. Rabbi Chanina is telling me you're allowed to do it here anyway, even though you'll increase this level of tumah midarabanan, you're allowed to do it for the reason that it's being destroyed, and therefore we're not concerned about its increased level of tumah. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to analyze Rabbi Akiva's halacha. Rabbi Akiva had said, if you have tameh oil, which became tameh by being touched by a tful yoim, it's allowed to be burned in a candle, meaning a cup, which is tameh tumas mace. The Gemara asks on Rabbi Akiva, I don't understand how this works over here. What is the level of tumah that the oil has? It became tameh from a tful yoim. The oil that touches a tful yoim counts as a shlishi. The oil itself is a shlishi. Now the cup that it's being put into, what is that? The cup touched a tameh mace. The tameh mace is an avatoma. The cup is a rishon l'tumah. What would it make the oil into? It would make the oil into a sheni. That means that the oil would move up from being a shlishi l'tumah to being a sheni l'tumah. That is interesting halacha, but we've already seen that halacha. That's the same halacha that Rabbi Chanina Sagana Kahanim said. He said you can move up the meat from a shlishi l'tumah to being a sheni l'tumah. What is Rabbi Akiva adding over what Rabbi Chanina said? So the Gemara says we're talking about where the cup is actually metal. And the halacha is that metal is an exception. Metal that touches a mace becomes an av hatuma. It's not a rishon l'tumah. It's an av hatuma just like the mace that it touched. Therefore, the oil that will be put into it will actually become a rishon l'tumah. So it's moving up from being a shlishi l'tumah to being a rishon l'tumah. That's Rabbi Akiva's extra chiddush. You're allowed to do that because you're destroying it as being burnt. Says the Gemara, why do you have to tell me this pshat? I'll tell you a different pshat. You don't have to say that the cup was made of metal. That's rare. Who makes cups for oil out of metal. It could be even a clay cup. It could be an earthenware cup. What's the chiddush over here? The chiddush is as follows. In case of Rabbi Chanina, the two pieces of meat, the meat that's becoming tameh from the other piece of meat is not really changing its halachic powers in any ways. It's going up from being a shlishi to being a sheni. But it still has the same position in halacha. It becomes tameh, and it can make other things tameh. It's kachim meat. Kachim meat can make other things tameh. If it's a shlishi, it can make a revi. Kachim can become a revi. And if it's a sheni, it can make a shlishi. There's no difference really. However, this oil here is truma. When the oil is truma, so if it's a shlishi, it can't transmit tuma any further because a truma can't become a revi. So therefore, this oil is the end of the line as far as truma tuma is concerned. When something is the end of the line, we call it puzzle. We don't call it tameh. We say that it's puzzle. You can't use it, but it doesn't cause any further problems for anybody else, for any other liquids, because it can't be tameh anything else. However, by moving it up to a sheni, which is what we wanted to say before we switched it to being a metal cup, by moving it up to a sheni, now it could make a shlishi. That's not called a puzzle anymore. That's called tameh. It's tameh, and it can transmit tumah to somebody else. So even though we're just moving up from a shlishi to a sheni, just like Rabbi Chanina said, this is quite different. Rabbi Chanina's move from a shlishi to a sheni didn't change its halachas, didn't change its name, didn't change its status. Rabbi Kiva is saying, even though you're changing its name and its status, you're moving it up from a shlishi to a sheni, but you're changing it from being a puzzle to a tameh. You're changing it from an object which can't push tumah further to something else into something which could push tumah further to something else. That's a chiddush that we even allow you to do that because you're destroying it. So why don't we say that that's pshat in Rabbi Kiva? So Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to say this pshat because Rabbi Yehuda anyway wanted to say that if you read the Mishnah carefully, it has to be talking about where the cup is made out of metal. Why? Because the Mishnah says that the cup became tummy with tumas mace. Why is it significant that it became tummy with a mace? What if it became tummy with a sheret, a rodent? Sheretz is also an av hatumah. The halach would be the same. Why does the Mishnah have to specify that it touched a dead human body? It must be because there's something, it's referring to a situation in which there's a difference between a dead human body and other av hatumah that was metame this cup. What situation is that? That's if the cup is made out of metal. There's a special halacha that metal that touches a dead human body stays in av hatumah. The metal itself is in av hatumah. It's learned from a pasuk which says chalal cherev. The chalal hareyu kecherev. The cadaver has the same halacha as the sword that killed it. The body is an avatumah, the sword that killed it is also an avatumah. But as far as other objects that are in metal, you wouldn't have that halacha. And that's why the Mishnah must have specified, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda wanted to learn it that way. Now, Rava says we could learn an interesting halacha out of what Rabbi Kiva said. You remember we said earlier that food can't make other food tameh? And we said that liquids could make other liquids tameh. Says Rava, that's a halacha da'araisa, that liquids could make other liquids, or even other foods. Liquid can make other foods tameh. That is a halacha da'araisa. How do I see that? Because let's analyze Rabbi Kiva. He's saying, it's a big chiddush that you're allowed to take this tameh oil and move it up the line from a shlishi to a rishon. Who cares? Why is that important? Either way, the oil is useless. You can't do anything with it. It's got to be burned. It must be that the reason that that's potentially a problem is because the oil can now go be matami something else. The shlishi can't be matami anything else, but the rishon now can be matami something else. The rishon can be matami something else. That's the significance of why moving it up to a rishon is a big chiddush that you're allowed to do that. So there must be that's halacha d'oraisa that the liquid oil could go be matami something else. So Gemara says, how do you know that that's a d'oraisa? It's significant that it could be matami something else. Who said it's a d'oraisa? Maybe it's only a d'rabbanan. It's still significant that Rabbi Kiva needs to tell me that you're allowed to move it up to a rishon, and now it could be matami other things d'rabbanan. You're right. It has to be. It has to be that we're moving it up to a level that it could go be matami other things. That has to be significant. But why does it have to be a d'oraisa halacha? It could be a d'rabbanan halacha. So Gemara answers, well, if it would be a d'rabbanan halacha, then why do we need to talk about where the cup was a tamei mace? Why do we need to have to talk about where the cup was an av hatumah? Let the cup be a rishon l'tumah. You know what? Let the cup be a sheni l'tumah. the oil that touches a sheni l'tama is liquid touching a sheni. Midrabanan, the halacha is that liquid is a very powerful tuma acceptor and transferer, and liquids which touch even a sheni, those liquids become a rishon midrabanan, and then it can transmit oil further. It can transmit tuma further. So if you're telling me that the ability of this oil to transmit tuma further is only dirabanan, then this Mishnah doesn't have to talk about a case where the cup that's giving it tuma was an avatuma, and therefore the cup is a rishon l'tuma. Doesn't need to be that. It could be talking about, or where the cup itself is an avatuma because it's made out of metal, which is what we said before. It doesn't need to be that. It could be even a sheni l'tuma. It could be that it got tame from a rishon. It could be whatever it is. And it'll still make that oil into a rishon that can transfer tuma further. Midrabanan, because midrabanan oil is liquids. Liquids can take tuma and transfer tuma further. Oil becomes a rishon. Anyway, all you're telling me is that the oil can transfer tuma midrabanan. So then midrabanan, there's much easier ways of doing it. What must be? It must be that we're trying to find a situation in which this oil can transfer tuma further mid'iraisa. And therefore, it has to be that the halacha is that oil can transfer tuma mid'iraisa, and that's what I'm learning out of this halacha of Rava. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to analyze the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said we could learn from this, he didn't specify what, he said we could learn from this that you're allowed to take truma tahira and truma tameya and burn them together when you're burning them because of chametz. Since you're destroying them anyway, it doesn't matter that the tahar truma will become tameh. It's being destroyed now. So Gemara says, how can you derive that? You're taking tahar truma, you're making it tameh. The two cases we saw before weren't making something tahar tameh, it was making something tameh a higher level of tumah, or it was making something which is puzzle because it's tameh, even though it can't transmit further, it's making it able to now transmit tumah further. You're increasing tumah of something that's existing tumah. But truma tahira, it's not tummy at all, to go me with tummy that and say it's not a problem since I'm destroying it now, I'm burning it anyway. Who says you're allowed to do that? Where did Rabbi Meir come up with such a halacha? So Gemara says Rabbi Meir understood that when Rabbi Chanina said you're allowed to burn in a carbon meat which is avhatuma, which became tummy from avhatuma, together with carbon meat which became tummy from vlad hatuma, he didn't understand av and vlad like we do. He didn't understand that it means in avatuma first tuma and vlad hatuma second tuma. He understood avatuma is tuma da'iraisa and vlad hatuma is tuma da'rabanan. That means that what you're actually doing is taking something which is tummy da'rabanan and now you're making it tummy da'iraisa and you're telling me that that's okay because you're destroying it. That means you're taking something which da'iraisa is tar and you're going ahead and you're making it tameh. You're allowed to do that because you're destroying it. Then you're also allowed to take truma tahira and make it tameh because you're burning it with the
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.